Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again with your late night creature feature. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's see what tonight's tale brings us. Dead ground. PeePaw had one rule about the Piney Woods. You go in as a group, you come out as a group. Didn't matter if somebody twisted an ankle or shot a deer a mile off course or got turned around in the dark. You wait, you find each other, you come out together. My name is Skylar Nelson. I'm 31 years old. I work HVAC in Nacogdoches, and I've got a good dog named Ranger. That's what's left. The trip was Sam's idea, which means it was a good idea poorly executed, which pretty much describes everything Sam ever did. He called me 2 weeks after we buried PeePaw and said we needed to get out there. Do the hunt, one last time, for the old man. Buster was already in. Dad never needed convincing when it came to deep timber and an excuse to drive the Polaris. PeePaw had been hunting that same stretch of Sabine County forest since before our dad was born, 60-something years. He knew those pines the way most men know their own kitchen. Knew where the deer bedded and where the hogs rooted and which creek crossings flooded in September. Left us his notes, left us his maps. Left us that stubborn old 30-06 that kicked hard and shot true. What he didn't leave us was any reason not to go. In hindsight, that was the tell. PeePaw left notes about everything. We rolled out on a Friday. Dad drove the F-350 with the Polaris loaded in the bed. Sam riding shotgun, running his mouth about a 10-point buck he swore he'd seen on trail cam footage that looked, and I quote, stupid big. Like a cartoon deer, like something God made on a dare. I had Ranger in the back seat with me. 60 pounds of blue-tick coonhound who smelled like dog and river water and didn't care about Sam's cartoon deer one bit. It was 89 degrees when we pulled off the highway, overcast sky the color of old dishwater, humid enough that stepping out of the truck felt like walking into somebody's mouth. East Texas in late October doesn't cool down the way people think. You get maybe 3 weeks in November where it pretends to be autumn. October is just summer with shorter days and the bugs slightly less aggressive. Slightly. Sam pulled on his pack and immediately started complaining about the heat, which Dad ignored, which Sam expected, which was the whole point. Those two communicated primarily through complaints and silence and had for 30 years. It worked for them. Ranger hit the ground and got his nose down immediately, tail going, happy dog, best version of himself out here. That part I think about a lot, how happy he was those first few hours. PeePaw's camp spot was 4 miles in, off any trail worth naming, down a creek drainage that twisted through pine and sweet gum and the occasional stand of cypress. We'd been there a dozen times growing up. It looked the same as always. Fire ring, flat ground, big longleaf pine with a fork in it about 15 feet up that PeePaw called the lookout, and that was its name. Sam nailed a photo of PeePaw to that tree. Just a snapshot, laminated, old man grinning, holding up a 6-point like he'd won a bet. Dad didn't say anything, just touched the edge of it with 2 fingers and turned away and started making camp. That was Friday evening. Sam appointed himself camp cook, which was either very confident or very stupid given that the man had once managed to burn a frozen pizza. He had a camp stove that cost more than most people's rent and a cast iron skillet that had belonged to his ex-wife and that he had kept on principle. What principle exactly he never specified. He'd also brought a Bluetooth speaker, which Buster had looked at for a long time without commenting and then walked away from, which was the most Buster thing you could do. The speaker stayed in the bag. The first attempt at dinner produced something that was technically edible if you didn't look directly at it. Buster ate it without comment. Skylar ate 2 bites and found a granola bar. Sam ate all of his, and then started in on what Skylar hadn't finished and then looked at Buster's empty bowl with what Skylar could only describe as professional admiration. Sam set his bowl down. I think I'm improving. You're not. You ate all of it. I eat everything. I ate a gas station burrito in 2009 that I am still not entirely over. So I'm better than a gas station burrito." "I didn't say that." Sam pointed at him. "You implied it." Buster picked up his coffee cup and looked into it like there might be answers in there. "You know PeePaw never cooked either. Your grandmother cooked. He just stood near the fire. That's the Nelson way. We're a great family of bystanders." Buster looked at Sam. Not at Skylar, at Sam. "You're his favorite. Don't ever tell your brother." "I'm right here." "I know where you are, son." They laughed. Not the forced kind, the kind that comes out of nowhere and surprises you because you didn't know it was still in there. Buster poured a finger of bourbon into his coffee, poured 2 more fingers straight into a tin cup, held it up toward the lookout pine, toward the laminated photo nailed to the bark. "For the old man," he said. They drank. Skylar looked at the photo while he drank. PeePaw at maybe 65, maybe 70, standing in this exact drainage with that 6-point held up, grinning like he'd gotten away with something. He'd been a big man once, broad through the chest, and age had only compressed him rather than diminishing him, just more concentrated. That was how Skylar always thought of it. He'd taught all 3 of them how to be in the woods, not just hunting, how to read weather and the way pine needles moved, how to tell the difference between a game trail and a deer bed, how to stay calm when you were lost, which you would be eventually, and how to use the creek drainages to find your way out. Patient about it the way competent people sometimes are, not explaining things twice, just showing them and trusting them to see. Nobody said anything for a while after the toast. The fire popped, the pines moved. Somewhere out in the dark, something that was definitely just an owl called once and went quiet. Ranger was curled by Skylar's feet, already half asleep, one ear up. The bugs were loud the way East Texas bugs get in October when they know their time is running short. That full-bore screaming chorus of crickets and cicadas and things Skylar had never bothered to identify. A wall of sound you stopped hearing after 20 minutes and didn't notice again until it stopped. Buster refilled his cup and stared at the fire, and Skylar knew he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere a long way back. PeePaw's rule had been the framework of every hunt they'd ever done in these woods. Buster used to say it word for word before they crossed the first cattle gate, not because they'd ever needed reminding. Because PeePaw had said it, and Buster was the kind of man who kept the things that mattered exactly where they'd always been. PeePaw had started hunting this specific timber in his late 20s, early 1960s, before most of this land got parceled or posted or paved over. He'd watched the piney woods change around him for 60 years and never once hunted anywhere else. Said he knew this timber better than anywhere on earth. Said he'd made promises to it. Skylar had always thought that was just old man talk. He'd brought the journal along on Sam's suggestion, PeePaw's hunting journal, green canvas cover, wire bound, going back 30 years, notes on every spot, every season. Moon phases, wind direction, where the big bucks staged in November, where the hogs wallowed in August. Practical, specific, obsessive. It was the most PeePaw thing in the world. Buster had put it in his pack without comment, just slid it in, zipped it up, moved on. They were up before light Saturday. Buster had the coffee going before either of his sons were fully out of their sleeping bags, moving around the camp the way he always moved in the woods, quiet and economical, not wasting anything. He'd been doing this since before Skylar was born. It showed. The plan was simple. Buster and Sam would push south toward a creek crossing PeePaw had circled in the journal 3 seasons running, where a white oak flat dropped down to the water and deer tended to cross in the early morning, moving back toward bedding cover. Skylar would take Ranger east along the ridge, working a finger of timber that narrowed toward a hardwood flat about 1.5 miles out. The gear they had for a 4-mile backpack hunt was, objectively, a lot. Buster's rifle was a custom-built bolt-action in .300 Win Mag that he'd had since Skylar was in middle school, scoped and bedded and more accurate than most people ever needed. Sam had a newer setup, semi-auto, which Buster had opinions about but kept mostly to himself. Skylar ran PeePaw's .30-06. He'd brought it on purpose. It felt like the right thing to do. It was good hunting, nothing spectacular, nothing wrong, just that particular quiet that settles over you when you're somewhere you're supposed to be, doing something your hands know how to do. The pines went gold when the sun got above them. A woodpecker somewhere was working a dead sweet gum. Ranger moved slow and methodical, nose down, swinging wide and coming back, tail easy and low, doing the job the way he always did it. Skylar had hunted with that dog for 6 years, knew his moods cold. 6 years of working together does that. When Ranger was interested, his tail went to a certain angle. When he was tracking something, he breathed a certain way. When he was happy, he was entirely obvious about it, and when something bothered him, he went quiet in a specific manner that Skylar had learned to pay attention to. Right now, he was just happy, working, good dog and good timber on a coolish morning. They met back at camp around 9 with nothing to show for it, and Sam with a story that was already getting bigger in the telling. Sam poured coffee without looking at anyone. It was a shooter, easy 120 yards, standing broadside. I don't know what happened. Buster looked at him. You missed. Something was off with the scope. The scope was fine yesterday. The heat affects the scope. Buster looked at him for a long moment. The heat affects the scope, he repeated, just to hear how it sounded. It's a known thing. It is not a known thing. It's absolutely a known thing. You can look it up. On what? We don't have signal out here. Sam pointed at him. Convenient. Skylar was grinning into his coffee. Ranger had given up on the conversation and was lying in a patch of shade looking wise, which was the right call. They went back out after a break. Skylar followed the creek drainage south, letting Ranger pick the pace. He had PeePaw's journal in his vest pocket, looking up spots as they moved. Most of the pages were exactly what you'd expect. Dense notes, little hand-drawn maps, dates going back years. PeePaw's cramped handwriting getting smaller as the pages went on, getting smaller toward the end. Every spot documented. Every crossing, every flat, every bench where deer liked to stand in the late afternoon and look downhill. Notes on wind direction for each spot, which way the thermal ran in the morning versus the evening, where to park yourself and where to avoid. Decades of accumulated knowledge written down in a green canvas journal that smelled like old paper and camp smoke. But this drainage, the one they'd made camp in, the one PeePaw had hunted for 60 years, blank. Not sparse, not thin, blank. Not a single note for this specific stretch of creek bottom. The spots above it documented obsessively. 3 pages of notes on a white oak flat half a mile north. The spots below it the same. A whole page on a crossing Buster and Sam had hunted that morning. But this 2-mile section of creek bottom where they'd set up camp, where the big longleaf pine stood with the lookout fork 15 feet up and PeePaw's photo nailed to the bark. Nothing. Skylar stood there in the drainage with the journal open and Ranger sitting at his feet looking up at him, waiting to see if they were moving or not. He turned the pages back and forth, checked the dates. The notes jumped from spots north of camp directly to spots south of camp like this section of drainage simply didn't exist. Like PeePaw had just skipped it every time, year after year, for 30 years. But that wasn't right either, because PeePaw had set up camp here specifically, had shown them this exact spot when they were kids, had called the lookout pine for as long as any of them could remember. He knew this place. He'd chosen it deliberately every single season. He just hadn't written anything down about it. Skylar closed the journal and put it back in his pocket and kept walking. He didn't say anything to Sam or Buster. He didn't know what he would have said. It happened around noon on Saturday. They'd come back together at camp, eating lunch, Sam occasionally revisiting the scope theory to diminishing returns, Buster having stopped responding to it entirely. Ranger had his nose in his bowl. Then he stopped eating, just lifted his head, ears up and forward, rotating slow, pointing south toward where the drainage bent around a stand of old cypress. What's he got? Sam was already looking south. Ranger wasn't moving toward anything. He was just standing there, stiff, listening to something none of them could hear. Then Skylar felt it. Not cold. Wrong is the better word. A wrongness in the air 60 yards south, right at the point where the trees thickened and the canopy closed, like standing near a window you can't see. A pressure at the edge of something. The insects had stopped. Not gradually, not the normal lull when a shadow passes over, all at once, no warning, and with them the birds and the wind. The whole column of sound that runs underneath everything out here, the sound you stop noticing after an hour until it's gone. Gone. 60 yards south, right at the tree line. Skylar walked toward it without deciding to. Got to maybe 40 yards and stopped because Ranger had moved in front of him, not blocking exactly, just present, just between Skylar and whatever lived south of them now. The tree line looked normal, pines and sweet gum in deep afternoon shadow, same as it had that morning, same as it had for 60 years maybe, but nothing moved in it, not a leaf, not a branch. The canopy at the edge was absolutely still while the trees behind Skylar moved in the small breeze that still existed on their side. Past the tree line, no breeze reached past it. Sam came up beside him, opened his mouth, and Skylar put a hand up and Sam closed it. They stood there 2 full minutes listening to the absence of everything. "That's not right," Sam said. "Quiet." It wasn't. Buster joined them without being called. He stood a step back, looking at the same nothing, saying nothing. Sam picked up a stick from the ground, about the length of his forearm, and threw it past the tree line. They watched it land. It didn't make a sound, not a crack when it hit a root, not a rustle in the dead leaves. It landed in there and the ground swallowed it like dropping something into still water. Sam pointed at the tree line. Thermal inversion. Buster looked at him. Temperature layers. You get pockets where sound doesn't carry the same way. I read about it. When do you read? I read. Buster turned back to the tree line. Ranger was growling now. Low and continuous, not the warning bark. The other kind. The kind that meant the dog had already made up his mind about something and was just waiting to see what the humans did. Hackles up from his shoulders to his tail, his whole body repositioned at an angle between Skylar and the 60-yard mark, head low and steady. Skylar put his hand on the dog's back. Ranger was vibrating like a running engine. Sam stepped forward. I'm going up to it. Buster put a hand out. No. Just to the edge, not through. I said no. There was something in Buster's voice that didn't invite argument, not the parental kind. Something older than that, quieter, coming from somewhere Skylar couldn't place. Sam looked at the tree line and looked at their father and didn't push. They spent another 20 minutes testing, more sticks, a handful of pine needles, a spent shell casing. Everything crossed that 60-yard mark and disappeared into silence. Things on their side still made sounds. Past the line, nothing. Ranger stopped growling. That was almost worse than the growling. He just stood there pressed against Skylar's leg hard enough that Skylar could feel the dog's heartbeat through his jeans and stared south and breathed. Give me a minute. He walked back to camp alone. He came back with his gloves on, his hat pulled low, the bandana from his pack pulled up over his face, every inch of exposed skin cover that could be covered. He looked methodical, decided. Skylar caught his arm. Dad? I need to know what we're dealing with. Already moving south. Slow, deliberate, the same walk he used approaching a downed deer, respectful. Sam stepped forward and Skylar grabbed his arm. Buster crossed the 60-yard mark. He made it 4 steps past it. He didn't scream. He folded, knees first, then sideways, the way a man goes down when the decision to fall isn't his anymore. He hit the ground and didn't move. Skylar and Sam were running before he landed. They grabbed him by the jacket and pulled, both of them, boots digging into the soft creek bottom, leaning back with everything they had. Buster was heavy, the way unconscious people always are, heavier than they should be, heavier than physics seems to account for. They got him back across the 60-yard mark and the heat returned immediately, like a wall, like opening an oven door in winter. His neck, his hands where the gloves ended at the wrist, the strip of forehead between his hat and the bandana. Everything exposed had gone the color of a bruise left for a week, gray and black and mottled, the skin pulled too tight, his cheeks were worse. The flesh there had pulled back along the cheekbone and split, not like a cut, like paper that had been in water too long, and underneath was the layer that isn't supposed to see light, not bone. Not quite bone, just the wrong layer, the layer you weren't meant to look at. His mouth was packed with something crystalline and white that couldn't be what it looked like. It was 87 degrees. It hadn't rained in 6 days. His chest moved, but the sound it made was wrong, small and rhythmic, like ice settling in a glass. Sam dropped to his knees. "Dad." Flat. That was worse than a scream. "Dad, look at me." Buster's eyes were open, tracking. He was still in there. They cleared his mouth as carefully as they could. The crystals were cold enough to numb Skylar's fingers on contact. Whatever it wasn't snow. You don't get snow forming inside a man's mouth in 87-degree October heat. It took an hour, the skin color walking back from whatever edge it had reached, the cracking in his breathing smoothing out slowly, by degrees, until it just sounded like breathing again. By the time he could sit up, they'd burned through half their water and the sun had moved a long way across what they could see of the sky. Sam hadn't spoken the whole time. He'd worked alongside Skylar, doing what needed doing, keeping the compresses cold and the water coming, and his hands moving, but his face had gone somewhere Skylar didn't recognize, not scared. Past scared, something that sat on the far side of fear where everything gets very quiet and very clear. Ranger had pressed himself against Skylar's back the entire time, not in the way he did when he wanted attention, in the way he did when he was trying to be useful, just there, warm, steady. Skylar had one hand on the dog's side for most of that hour without thinking about it. "Don't," Buster said, when Skylar reached for the satellite communicator. Voice rough, scraped raw. "Not yet. I need to think." He sat with his back against a longleaf pine for a long time, looking south, not saying anything. "1 second I was walking," he said, finally. "Then just nothing. No cold, no pain, nothing at all." He looked at his hands. The skin still wrong, still too dark, but the flesh had stopped pulling. "How long was I past the line?" 4 steps. Sam's voice was steady. 3 seconds, maybe. Buster nodded like that was the answer to something he'd already been calculating. Skylar had been watching the tree line while Buster recovered. Specifically, he'd been watching the stick Sam had thrown, lying in the leaves 60 yards south. He'd lined it up against a Y-shaped sweet gum on the near edge of the tree line and checked it every 10 minutes. The stick was closer. Not by a lot. 8 yards, maybe, in the last hour, but closer. "It's moving," Skylar said. Both of them looked at him. "The line. It's been moving since Buster crossed. Slow, but it's moving." He pressed his knife blade into the bark of the pine behind them, marking it. "That's where the edge was 20 minutes ago. Watch." They watched. 4 minutes later, the silence passed the mark. Quiet advancing, steady, swallowing insect noise and bird noise and the small shifting wind as it came. Sam went still in a way Sam almost never went still. He started pressing sticks into the ground at intervals, north and east and what he could judge of west, mapping the perimeter. The circle was closing from every direction, and to the south, past the cypress stand, the drainage narrowed. Skylar had been down that way with PeePaw years ago. The creek bent hard east and the bluffs came in on both sides, pine walls close, the canopy knitting overhead, a natural funnel, a narrow place with no exits but through. Buster said it quiet, almost to himself. "Whatever this is, it ain't hunting us." He looked at the mapped perimeter, at the sticks in the ground, at the narrowing terrain to the south. "It's parking us." Skylar pulled PeePaw's journal out, turned to the section on this drainage, the blank pages, held it out to Buster. Buster took it, read the nothing on those pages for a long time, turned them slowly, then he stopped. Page 47, a clean straight edge on the inside of the binding where the paper met the wire, not torn in frustration, not an accident. Deliberate, careful, someone had decided it needed to not be found. PeePaw had removed a page. Buster closed the journal and put it in his own pocket. The line was at 50 yards. Skylar tried the satellite communicator. Signal sent clean, indicator light solid green. Nothing came back. He tried twice more over the next hour. Same result every time. The unit was functioning. Something was happening to what they sent. The line was at 45 yards by the time they'd accepted the communicator wasn't going to help them. The perimeter was tightening slow enough that panic hadn't fully arrived yet, fast enough that the math was clear. 6 hours to dark, a circle that had shrunk 20 yards in the last 3 hours. Skylar laid out the 3 choices because somebody had to. Stay in the shrinking bubble, see how far it went, maybe it stopped, maybe there was a floor to this thing, a point where it held and didn't go further, hope it wasn't what it looked like. Run the perimeter together, all 3 at once, and take whatever crossing the line did to you. Buster had come back from 3 seconds. Maybe momentum carried you through, maybe it didn't. Maybe 3 seconds was the margin and 4 seconds was something else entirely. Move south into the ravine on their own terms. The thing was walking them there regardless. Maybe there was something in that narrow place it needed. Maybe the ravine was the kill box. Maybe it was the only way out. No way to know without going. Nobody said anything for a long time after that. Skylar watched the line while they sat with it, watched the leading edge of that silence creep another yard closer while they weren't deciding. Whatever this thing was, it was patient. It wasn't rushing. It didn't need to. It had geometry on its side and time and a terrain that was doing exactly what it needed the terrain to do. He thought about PeePaw, 60 years of seasons in this specific drainage, coming back every year, knowing what was in it. He thought about the torn page. Ranger was pressed against Skylar's leg, not barking, not growling, just leaning into him, warm and steady, looking south with his ears flat and the tail that had been going all Friday evening absolutely still. The sun was getting low, shadows in the pines going long and purple. 40 yards. We sleep on it, Buster said. Fire, shifts, nobody does anything permanent before first light. It wasn't a good plan. It was the only plan that didn't require immediately doing something irreversible. Skylar looked at PeePaw's photo on the lookout pine, the old man grinning, holding up his 6-point like he'd won a bet. That smile. Skylar had seen it his whole life and never thought about it until now. It wasn't the smile of a man who'd gotten lucky on a good hunt. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly where he was standing and had already decided how things were going to go. The fire was going before dark. Nobody slept. They kept the fire going in shifts, feeding it through the night, not for warmth because warmth wasn't the problem, but because fire was the thing you did when everything else had stopped making sense. Buster sat his shift without complaint, same as always, same as 30 years of hunting camps. Sam sat his and stared south the whole time without blinking much. Skylar sat his shift and thought about PeePaw's list. 14 names, family names going back as far as Skylar could trace them. Raymond, PeePaw's brother, hunting accident, 93. Curtis, a cousin twice removed, gone the year Skylar was born, some story about getting lost in the timber. He'd grown up hearing these names at family reunions and holiday tables, the gone ones, the ones who'd had bad luck out in the woods. He'd never thought to count them, never thought to line their dates up and look at what shape they made. October, November, the hunting months. Year after year after year, going back to whenever PeePaw had first come down into this drainage and whatever had happened here and whatever deal had gotten made in the aftermath of it. PeePaw's brother Raymond hadn't died in a hunting accident. Skylar was pretty sure of that now. Ranger didn't sleep either. He ran the perimeter of the fire's light all night in a pattern that wasn't quite pacing and wasn't quite patrol. Short bursts toward the south edge of the camp, stopping at the same invisible point every time, barking twice, hard and sharp, then going quiet, then doing it again 20 minutes later, counting, checking, making sure. By midnight, the line was at 35 yards. By 3 in the morning, it was at 30. Skylar marked it with sticks every hour, sat with his back against the lookout pine and watched the marks and did the math that didn't have a good answer at the end of it. 30 yards of safe ground, shrinking. The fire in the middle, 3 men and a dog and a satellite communicator that sent signals into nothing. Sam came and sat beside him around 4 in the morning without being asked. They didn't talk. Just sat there watching the fire and listening to Rangers patrol in the absolute silence beyond the perimeter and the occasional pop of green wood in the flames. After a while, Sam looked at the fire. You think PeePaw knew this was going to happen to us specifically? Skylar thought about the list, about the name at the bottom with no date beside it. Yeah, quiet, just that. I think he did. Sam nodded slowly, processed it. That's a hell of a thing. It was. First light came gray and close, an East Texas dawn that didn't so much arrive as seep in through the canopy. The bugs had been silent all night. That was the thing that kept getting to Skylar. Out here, you didn't notice the bug noise until it stopped, and then it was all you could think about. The silence was a presence. It had weight. It pressed against the warm bubble, testing the edges of it. Buster was up before the light fully arrived, moving around the camp with purpose, breaking down what didn't need to stay, packing what they'd need to move, not panicking, deciding. He'd always been like that, even when Skylar and Sam were kids and the truck broke down 3 miles from nowhere or the weather turned on a float trip. Buster assessed and then he moved. He didn't waste anything on fear. We're going south, not a question. Sam looked at him, into the ravine. Staying here isn't a plan. The ravine is terrain we can see. This, he gestured at the closing perimeter, we can't see. I'd rather deal with what I can see. It was reasonable. It was the reasoning Buster had applied to hard situations his whole life, and that had served him well. Skylar packed his gear and didn't say what he was thinking, which was that the thing in the tree line had been patient for a very long time and had already decided where they were going. Ranger pressed against his leg while he packed. Warm, steady. Skylar kept one hand on him. They broke camp at first light and moved south. The line moved with them. That was the part that took the last of the hope out of it. Skylar had told himself, without quite admitting he was doing it, that maybe movement would help. That maybe the perimeter was tied to the camp spot somehow, to the fire ring or PeePaw's marked tree or the specific coordinates of that particular ground. That moving would change something. It didn't. The 60-yard bubble moved with them like a second skin. 30 yards of safe ground in every direction, the silence pressing in from all sides, the perimeter advancing slow and constant at the same pace it had been advancing all night. The ravine was a quarter-mile south. They could see the terrain dropping, the bluffs coming in on both sides, the pine walls tightening. The creek bent hard left at the bottom and the canopy knitted overhead, and the whole thing narrowed down to maybe 40 feet across at the widest point. It was exactly what Skylar had remembered from the times PeePaw had walked him through here as a kid. He hadn't understood then why PeePaw always turned around at the entrance, always found a reason, always said they'd go further next time and never did. Ranger was at level 4 now, not barking at the perimeter anymore. Just walking with his head low and his hackles up and his eyes moving, checking angles, checking the tree walls, checking the canopy overhead, that alert. The one that meant the dog had already reached a conclusion, and the conclusion was bad. Easy, Skylar said, quiet. Ranger didn't look at him, kept his eyes on the tree line. They were 50 yards from the ravine entrance when the line surged. Not the slow creep it had been doing. A lurch, sudden and hard, like something leaning into it with intention. The silence swallowed 10 yards in under a second, and Buster was at the leading edge of the safe ground when it happened, mid-stride. moving toward the ravine with his pack on his back and the .30-06 in his hands. The line took him between one step and the next. He didn't make a sound. He just dropped. Skylar and Sam were running before he hit the ground. They grabbed him by the jacket and pulled, both of them, boots digging into the soft creek bottom, everything they had. Buster was dead weight in the way that unconscious people always are, more than he should be, the ground not wanting to give him up. They got him back. His neck, the back of his hands, the strip of forehead between his hat and the bandana he'd put back on that morning. Everything exposed had gone the color of a bruise left for a week, gray-black and mottled, the skin pulled too tight across the bone underneath. His cheeks were worse. The flesh had pulled back along the cheekbone and split, not like a cut, like paper left in water too long, and underneath was the layer that isn't supposed to see light. Not bone, not quite bone. Just wrong, just the layer you weren't meant to look at. His mouth was packed. It was 84 degrees. It hadn't rained in 7 days. His chest moved, but the sound it made this time was different from the day before. Not the small rhythmic clicking. Something deeper, something further in. The damage was inside this time. "Dad," Sam's voice, flat and cracked at the same time. "Dad, stay with me." Buster's eyes were open. They found Sam's face and stayed there. They cleared his mouth, worked on him the way they'd worked on him the day before, what Skylar knew inside the first minute. He knew the way you know things when you've done shift work enough to recognize which way a situation is running. The damage wasn't surface this time. The damage was in the breathing, in the sound the chest made, in the way the eyes were tracking, but something behind them had already started the process of letting go. Buster lasted 20 minutes. He didn't say anything. He didn't have the air for it. He looked at Sam and then at Skylar and then at the pines overhead, and whatever he saw up there, whatever the last thing was, it didn't look like fear. Skylar chose to believe that. Chose it deliberately and has kept choosing it since. Then he was just wait. Nobody said anything for a while. Sam stayed on the ground next to him with his knees pulled up and his arms across them and his face turned away. He wasn't crying. Skylar thought later that that was maybe the worst part. Sam was the kind of person who cried at movies and argued with referees and laughed too loud and took everything straight to the surface. Sitting there not crying meant something had gone somewhere past the surface and wasn't coming back up. Ranger lay down against Buster's side, put his chin on Buster's chest, stayed. Skylar sat with them, long enough for the light to move in the canopy overhead, long enough for the silence at the perimeter to feel patient rather than threatening, which was somehow worse. It knew they weren't going anywhere. It could wait. He thought about the morning they'd driven out here, Sam running his mouth about the cartoon deer. Buster in the driver's seat not saying anything, the way he drove, both hands on the wheel, watching the road, the last normal thing any of them would ever do together, and none of them knew it. He touched his father's hand once. Then he got up and started on the pack because somebody had to. Methodical. Keep your hands moving. That's the trick your brain learns after enough bad days. Keep your hands moving and the rest follows. Water, first aid kit, the emergency blanket Buster always packed and never needed until now. The .30-06 shells in the side pocket, which were no good to anyone for this particular problem, but he pocketed them anyway. Camp food, a lighter, a fixed blade knife in a leather sheath that had belonged to PeePaw before Buster and that Skylar put in his own belt without thinking about it. He found it behind the journal. Not torn out, folded separately, tucked in on purpose, a piece of paper that had been folded and unfolded enough times that the creases had gone soft as cloth. PeePaw's handwriting. Smaller than the journal entries, more deliberate. The handwriting of a man who was choosing each word carefully, and had chosen it many times before. A list of names. 14 of them. Family names. Everyone. Cousin Skylar barely knew. An uncle who died of a heart attack in 2003. PeePaw's brother Raymond, gone in the 90s. Hunting accident, was what everyone said. A man named Dell who Skylar vaguely remembered from childhood. Big man, Loud laugh, gone before Skylar was 10. Dates beside each name, not birth dates, not death dates, just dates. October dates, mostly, some November. Skylar sat there in the dirt next to his father's body and read the list twice. 14 names, decades of Octobers. A pattern so obvious that it was only invisible if you'd never had reason to look for it, if you'd had every reason not to look, if someone had spent 60 years making sure the looking never happened. Last entry on the list. Buster Nelson. No date. Skylar looked at it for a long time. Then he folded it back along its soft creases and put it in his own pocket. PeePaw hadn't been warning anyone. He hadn't been keeping a record out of guilt or grief or the need to bear witness to what he'd done. He'd been keeping a ledger. The organized, methodical record of a man who had an arrangement and was tracking the terms of it, year after year, name after name, keeping the books. 11 years PeePaw had bought himself after his own October in this drainage. 11 years before a heart gave out in a hospice bed with the family gathered around him saying peaceful in the Lord's will and he had a good long life. Skylar looked at the line, 20 yards now. He looked at Sam. Sam was already standing up. "We run," Sam said. Quiet, decided, the voice he used when he'd already done the math and wasn't interested in doing it again. Sam. Skylar. He looked at him straight on. Really looked. The way he did when something actually mattered. 20 yards. "We run it together, side by side. We don't stop for anything. Speed is the variable we haven't tested. We go fast enough, we get through." "We don't know that. We don't know it doesn't work either." He picked up his rifle, checked it automatic, hands not needing to think about it, the way Buster had taught them. "What's the plan otherwise, Sky? Stand here until it's 10 yards? 5? We're already out of options. We have been out of options since yesterday." Skylar looked at Ranger. The dog was on his feet, watching him, not watching Sam, watching Skylar specifically, the way he did when he was waiting on a decision and understood that it wasn't his to make. Ears up, ready. 60 pounds, a blue-tick coonhound who had been the bravest creature in those woods for 2 days running and was apparently willing to go further. "Ranger goes first," Skylar said. Agreed. He looked at Sam, his brother, 3 years older, louder by a mile. The man who'd burned a frozen pizza and blamed a scope and kept a cast-iron skillet on principle and called him 2 weeks after a funeral and said we need to go do the hunt one last time for the old man. "Okay." They ran. Ranger went first, 2 steps ahead, and cleared the line without breaking stride. Skylar watched him go and then he was running too, Sam right beside him, and the cold hit him and his lungs locked. His hands went white. Something was looking for the switch inside his chest. His vision went white at the edges. His legs kept moving. Sam's knees went first. Not buckling, snapping, each stride a wet crack that Skylar felt in his back teeth. Sam lurched forward and threw his hands out to catch himself and both arms shattered on impact. Not breaking, shattering, the way frozen wood comes apart when you drop it just right. Bone fragments scattered across the creek bottom. What was left of Sam didn't stop moving. That was the part that didn't leave. The torso kept going, kept dragging, fingers that were mostly gone, still clawing at the dirt, still working, still trying to get somewhere. Sam got his head up once. Looked at Skylar, clear, focused, all the way present despite every single thing that was happening to his body. "Tell Ranger I said hey." Then he stopped. Not a process, just a switch thrown somewhere, then stillness. Skylar stood holding nothing. The cold was eating up through his palms, through his wrists, climbing. His hands had gone white and strange and far away feeling. He let go. He ran. Running. Ranger somewhere ahead in the brush. His feet on the creek bottom, wet rock and root. The cold at his back gaining ground. PeePaw's voice. Real enough to hear. Go in together. Come out together. The list. 14 names. Buster at the bottom with no date. He'd said it every single time they crossed the cattle gate. 30 years. 3 boys who thought it was wisdom, who thought the old man was just being careful. You feed it together, or you run alone. PeePaw had run alone once. Bought 11 years. Skylar ran. The tree walls came in on both sides as the ravine closed around him, pine bluffs rising, canopy knitting overhead, the space narrowing down to 30 feet, 20, the silence pressing from 3 sides now. The cold at his back, deliberate, patient, steering him exactly where it wanted him to go. It was hurting him. He knew it was hurting him. He ran anyway because the alternative was stopping, and stopping was over. His hands were still wrong, white and distant, and not entirely his anymore. He couldn't feel the rifle he was still somehow carrying, and at some point he let it go and heard it hit the creek bottom behind him and didn't stop. Ranger was somewhere ahead of him. He could hear the dog moving in the brush, crashing through undergrowth, paws on wet rock, and that sound was the only good thing in the world right then, and he ran toward it. The ravine narrowed to 15 feet, the bluffs on both sides close enough to touch. The canopy overhead had knitted shut, and it was dim down here, the light coming through layers of pine and sweet gum and thin green strips, fighting to get in. The cold hit harder in the narrow space. The ravine was doing exactly what it had always been built to do. The east bluff had a crack in it. Not a trail, not even close to a trail. A drainage seam where water cut down through the rock in wet season, choked with yopon and greenbrier, maybe 2 feet wide at the opening, and the brush so thick you couldn't see 10 feet up it. Easy to miss. Easy to walk right past in any kind of hurry. Skylar saw it because PeePaw had shown it to him once when he was maybe 12 years old, crouched down beside him in this exact spot and pointed at it without saying why. Shown it the way he showed things, once, without explanation, trusting it to stick. He'd never brought them down into the ravine again after that day. It had stuck. Skylar hit the opening at a run and went to his hands and knees, pushing through the brush, Yopon raking his face and opening up his cheek. Greenbrier catching his jacket and tearing free, and then catching his hands, and he lost skin to it and didn't stop. The seam was steep, wet rock under his palms, and he climbed it on all fours, not thinking, just moving, just up. The cold found him in the seam. Not all at once, seeping through his palms first where the rock was wet. He felt it happen and kept climbing because stopping was over. His fingers stopped reporting somewhere around the halfway point. Still working, still gripping, but the information wasn't coming through anymore. White and far away, somebody else's hands on the rock. The cold hit the back of his neck. Once, hard, like a deliberate hand reaching up through the seam after him, fingers spread, finding purchase. He felt it grab. He pulled anyway, dragged himself the last 6 feet by his elbows, by his forearms, hands gone somewhere past useful. Ranger was above him, teeth in his jacket collar, pulling. 60 pounds of blue-tick coonhound with his back legs braced against the rock, hauling with everything he had. Skylar came out of the seam like something being born wrong. He hit the bluff top and couldn't get his hands under him and went down face first into the scrub oak and just stayed there a moment, cheek against the dirt, breathing. The October heat hitting his back after so much cold. He looked at his hands. The fingertips on his right hand had gone gray-black. Not all of them. 3 fingers. The pinky, the ring finger, the middle. The kind of damage that doesn't hurt yet because the nerves haven't caught up. And he knew from the color that when they did catch up it was going to be bad and permanent and his. Ranger pressed his whole body against Skylar's side and shook. Skylar got his good hand into the dog's fur and held on. Behind them the ravine was quiet. Not wrong quiet, just wind and scrub oak and somewhere a crow starting up and then thinking better of it. He didn't look back. It took him a while to stand, longer than he wanted to admit, but he got there. Then he walked out. The official report said hunting accident, exposure, equipment failure in extreme conditions, 2 deceased, 1 survivor, case closed, Sabine County, mid-October. Nobody pushed. Skylar didn't push. There was nothing to push with. He went back to Nacogdoches, went back to HVAC work, crawl spaces and attic units, and the particular hell of diagnosing a refrigerant leak in August. Normal work. Work that made sense. Work where the problem had a cause and the cause had a fix, and the fix either worked or it didn't, and either way you knew. Ranger slept at the foot of the bed. Had since the first night home and hadn't stopped. Skylar didn't discourage it. He didn't go into the woods. Not hunting season, not for anything. Drove past the timber on jobs sometimes and kept his eyes on the road. 6 months passed. He didn't count them on purpose. They just passed. 6 months to the day his phone rang at 11:15 at night. Sam's name on the screen. Skylar stood in his kitchen for 4 rings looking at it. Then it stopped. Then the voicemail notification came through. He played it. Sam's voice. Exactly right. The cadence, the slight rasp he'd always had, running words together the way he always did when he was getting to the point. And the laugh first, the one he did before a punchline, the one that meant he thought he was about to be funny, the one that only worked about half the time. Then, remember that summer we drove PeePaw's truck into the creek? How mad he was, how he made us pull it out by hand. A pause. A sound like wind. He wasn't mad. I figured that out. He was scared for us. Different thing. Ranger was sitting up on the bed, staring at the phone, not growling, just staring. Found a way through the lines, Sky. The voice easy, calm, almost gentle. It's warm on the other side. Come back out. Bring Ranger. Skylar stood there holding the phone. He set it on the counter. It hit the linoleum instead. He didn't pick it up. Well, boys and ghouls, that wraps up another terrorific tale from the vault. Poor old Buster Nelson thought he knew those pines. 60 years of family hunts in that timber and he still walked straight into it. Oh, so sad. Too damn bad. And Sam, bless his bleeding heart, had a plan right up until his arms shattered on the creek bottom. Boy always said he'd find a way through anything. Turns out he was right. Just not the way he meant. Just how we fucking love it. Hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Central. And trust me, the next one's even nastier. Leave a like if you'll never look at a quiet tree line the same way again. And drop a comment. Would you have answered that phone? I genuinely want to know who's out there in the dark with me. Where are you listening from tonight? Until next time, kiddies, keep your fires burning and your eyes on the trees. This has been your late night creature feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo. And hey, look on the bright side. Skylar got out. Sure, he lost 3 fingers to frostbite in 87-degree October heat. He'll never set foot in the woods again. And somewhere in East Texas there's a voicemail from his dead brother he can't bring himself to delete. But hey, Ranger's fine, and that's all that matters. Gotta love dogs. Man's best friend. Sweet dreams, kiddies. Sweet dreams.